I have a confession. I've been living in Japan for about 5 years, and my Japanese sucks. Fine sucks. I'm not comfortable in Japanese. I can hold a conversation to an extent. I usually know what's going on, but I have a harder time responding because I get incredibly nervous. And even if I know how to say something correctly, I'll often say it wrong. I know about maybe 700 kanji, which means that I'm completely illiterate. I can only read things if they're written for a younger audience, essentially. If I get something in the mail, there's no way. Google Translate, there it goes. I just took the JLPT N2 and I almost probably failed. So for those of you guys who don't know me, my name is Kirsty. I've been living in Japan for about 5 years now, and I'm a digital marketer at an agency here in Tokyo. And while I've been studying Japanese for probably at least 3-4 years, I'm still not very good at it. But after a couple of years of studying now, I think that I have finally narrowed down what works and what doesn't. So I'm going to share my list of 8 Japanese learning tips, as well as the tips that I'm going to commit to this year. So if you are learning Japanese too, please let me know in the comments. We can keep each other accountable. You can come back later and let me know how it's going. I'm going to need the motivation too, so let's keep each other on track and let's learn Japanese together. So I have 8 tips, and let's start with tip number 1, which is memorize entire sentences. When I first started studying, I thought this was kind of cheating, and that how am I going to memorize every single possible sentence ever? It's not possible. This is a waste of time. So I focused on grammar and vocabulary, thinking that I would just remember how to fit them together when the time came, and that this would work. Maybe this works for you, but for me, it doesn't at all. So instead, I have started, what really let me start speaking was to memorize full sentences in response to common questions. So things like, when did you move to Japan? Why did you move here? What do you like about Japan? These are things I get asked a lot living here. So I memorized full responses so that I could say them confidently. And then that was honestly enough to get me going. And then from that point, I could kind of actually speak. And then eventually, once you do memorize a lot of sentences, you can start sort of changing them and adjusting them depending on the situation. So keep studying your vocabulary, keep studying your grammar, but if you want to start speaking, memorize full sentences. Tip number 2 is shadowing. When I first started speaking Japanese, it was like a giant tongue twister. There's so many vowels. I was like, I was tripping over my words. I would get halfway through a sentence and just, I'm sure this has happened to some other people. It can't only just be me. So getting used to this pronunciation, it can be difficult, especially if you're not living in Japan and you don't hear it all the time. Like you have no opportunity to kind of mimic that correct sound. So I suggest finding a TV show or a song, something that is all in Japanese that you like, and listen to it again and again and again and try to say it along with the character or the singer as they speak. You're going to start, it's going to be difficult, like do one sentence at a time. Eventually it'll get just more comfortable in your mouth. Like it'll feel like you can say these words and you'll start to recognize them as individual words instead of just a mash of things that you don't understand. And speaking of pronunciation, my tip number 3 is learn hiragana from the start. It might seem a little difficult at the beginning, but it's actually not that many letters. You should be able to, if you practice every day, be able to get at least a little comfortable with them after a week. You don't need to learn all the kanji. Just start with hiragana because it will change how you sound in Japanese. So the way Japanese works is that every consonant except for N, which can be by itself, but every other consonant needs to be attached to a vowel. So there's a lot of sounds that if you read them in Romaji, which is just English letters pronouncing Japanese, you're going to say it wrong. And it'll get to the point where people actually won't understand you. Like, for example, a really common word that kind of everybody knows is karaoke, right? That's the English pronunciation that you've probably heard, karaoke. The Japanese pronunciation is karaoke, karaoke. So if you go around and you start saying karaoke, people might not even understand you. It is pretty different. Karaoke, karaoke, it's pretty different. And I might not even be pronouncing it exactly perfect, but it's a lot closer than karaoke. So this is just one example. It's going to happen a lot. So just trust me, you want to do hiragana from the beginning to make sure that you're not having to correct this later on because it's really hard once it becomes a habit. But for reading generally, my tip number 4 is for kanji, use wanikani. You don't need to learn kanji right off the bat. I'm saying that again, it's not as important. Hiragana is important at the beginning, but you do need to learn how to read eventually, so use wanikani. For some reason, I cannot memorize kanji in any other way. I don't know why it works, but it does. It uses stories and space repetition, which is totally normal. So many apps do that, but the other apps don't work. And I honestly can't tell you why, but wanikani is the one, and you want to start early because you can't start in the middle. So if you already know like 1,000 kanji, then don't use wanikani because you're going to have to speed run like 6 months worth of content to get to the kanji that you don't know. But if you know, I would say even 500 or less kanji, I would use wanikani because it is fantastic. It will teach you all over 2,000 kanji and over 6,000 vocabulary words, and it works. I am not sponsored by them. If they would like to sponsor me, please do. I've made at least 20 people sign up for this app, but it is the one. Trust me. wanikani, I'll link it down below. Tip number 5 is talk to real people in Japanese. So once you have kind of some basics, you can introduce yourself. Maybe you can talk about your hobby or something like this. Find someone to actually use it with, because it's not going to be very fun if you never get to actually use the language that you're learning. Of course, it's a little difficult. If you don't live in Japan, you might not know any Japanese people that are willing to have a conversation with you. So I recommend using italki. I've used italki for several years. It's basically just a website where you can connect with either professional tutors or just random community people that will speak Japanese to you. And it's really affordable. I'll put a link down below. You'll get $10 of free credits if you do use that link. And then, of course, it'll help me out a little bit as well. But italki, I think, is the easiest one. There's no commitment. You can do just one class if you want. Just give it a go. And it'll give you the opportunity to actually use your Japanese. And I find that a lot of the tutors on there are really friendly, really helpful. I can't recommend it enough. Along the lines of learning things in a professional manner, my 6th tip is to take a class. So I never actually came to Japan as a language student. I came here as like working right from the start and never really had the opportunity to be a full-time language student, which honestly I would love to do. But eventually I did get to do part-time classes. So when I first got here, it was the plague, so there was no classes for like 2 or 3 years. But after that, I started taking some classes, and it was a really good jumpstart to learning, and it also forces you to do it. If you're someone like me who maybe struggles to make yourself study every single day, if you paid for 3 classes a week, then you kind of have to go. So just having that like financial pressure is helpful to make sure that you are at least studying something. And if you're a complete beginner, it can be a good place to start, because Japanese is really overwhelming at the beginning. It takes a long time to feel like you even know what you're doing at all, and you'll have a lot of questions. So I definitely recommend classes for complete beginners. If you're intermediate, I think you can study a lot by yourself, honestly, and just use conversation practice. The next point where I think that it might get really helpful is if you need to learn something really specific, like let's say you're going to medical school or something and there's a lot of specific vocabulary. I think that doing classes for that is also going to be really helpful. So I actually have an article that goes over learning Japanese. I have reviewed some schools in Japan if you do want to check them out. Otherwise, you can check online. If you check Gogo Nihon, I think it's a free service, and I think they do some online classes. They could help you find some. Or you can check your local university, because a lot of universities will offer language classes to just anyone and for a lower price than actual university classes. Tip number 7 is to make Japanese a part of your everyday life. So this tip is really important, especially if you don't live in Japan, because you're gonna have to put some effort into this. So how do you put Japanese into your everyday life? There's a lot of ways you can do this, but I think the easiest are through music and TV shows. So do you listen to music ever? When you are maybe working out, on your commute, you now listen to Japanese music. Try to listen as much as you can. Just get used to the sounds, and it's going to eventually help your ear just kind of tune to the language a little bit. If you can get into a TV show, I know that some people say don't learn Japanese from anime because they say things that people don't actually say in real life, but I kind of think who cares? The point of this is just to get used to hearing Japanese, get used to trying to listen to it, understand it, and honestly, if you like it, then that's the way that you should learn it. Another good way to go is watching like J-dramas or any kind of reality TV, because then you will get sort of real conversations. You could also get into game streaming, for example, watch someone if that's something that you're interested in. Just anything that you actually like and you're going to do and put into your daily life. If you can read a bit, maybe like N3 level, you can start doing this. You can start reading manga. You can start maybe playing a video game in Japanese. I was playing a Zelda game in Japanese, and it's because it is also for kind of geared toward kids. It has the like furigana above all the kanji, so it makes it really easy. And it's just more fun than your textbook, so why not do that? Like, I would way rather do my reading comprehension by reading a manga than reading some random story about a lady complaining about someone on the train in my textbook. So your choice, but make it fun. If you have to study anyway, make it fun. Another good way is to just talk to yourself in Japanese. I mean, it's kind of weird, but that inner monologue that you maybe have in your head, try doing it in Japanese, and you're going to really quickly realize what you know how to say and what you don't know how to say. Journaling in Japanese is also one that you can do. I find this one really tough because I always have to look up stroke orders and stuff, and it really slows me down. But if writing in Japanese is something that you do want to do eventually, then journaling is another really good way to do this. Just the more you can integrate it, the more you can use it, the more you'll remember, and it'll just make the learning experience a lot more fun. So my last tip is more for people who are actually just trying to pass the JLPT, which is buy a JLPT textbook. So I know the JLPT is supposed to be testing Japanese language proficiency, but like there's no speaking component, there's no writing component. It's all just reading comprehension, grammar, and listening. And honestly, part of the test is just testing how well you can do the test. So you are going to need some kind of strategy pieces and also to get used to the style of questions, the speed, stuff like that. So the two series that I recommend the most are the new Kanzen Master series and also Nihongo Somatome. So the first one is much more comprehensive. If you're only going to buy one series, get the new Kanzen ones because they give you tips as well as practice questions, and it's a lot more substantial. Whereas the Nihongo Somatome ones, they're more just like practice questions, and they're quite brief. You kind of sometimes have to look up your own explanations, but I do like them because they're not very overwhelming. They kind of only show you what's really necessary, and they give you a lot of practice questions. Another book that I'm using the Try series. So this one is kind of an all-arounder. Those other series that I mentioned, they have a book for each section. Usually I actually only use grammar and reading comprehension, but they also have one for kanji and vocabulary, whereas the Try one is kind of an all-in-one book. So if you only have the budget for one book or you only want to buy one book, then the Try series is another good one. Yeah, you'll probably struggle with, it doesn't do kanji or anything like that, but you're using wanikani anyway, so it doesn't matter. So those are the textbooks that I would recommend, and do a lot of practice tests. That is probably the best that you can do if you want to prepare to actually do the test. So those are my tips, but what am I actually going to commit to this year? So I want to pass the JLPT N2 by the end of this year, but I also want to get just comfortable in Japanese. I want to be able to speak more effortlessly without panicking every single time someone comes up to me in Japanese. So I do have a full-time job, so I can't commit like 5 hours a day, but I do want to make sure that I am doing something every day. So I will commit to making sure I complete my wanikani reviews every single day. I always say I'm going to do this, and I never do it, but this is the year. I am also going to commit to working on my JLPT textbook at least for 20 minutes every day. If I can't do 20 minutes, I don't know. So those are the two main things that I'm going to do to practice the test. And then I'm also going to actively try to speak to people more in Japanese. I am the worst that once I find out that someone speaks English, I will switch to English, which is ridiculous and is the main reason probably why I'm still not comfortable. So I'm going to make myself try to use Japanese, be more comfortable. If I make a mistake, it's fine. Which is hard to get over, but that's what I'm going to do. So those are my big commitments. I'm going to keep you guys up to date. Probably as we keep going, I'll have to add some extra things that I'm going to do once I realize that I'm not ready for the test. But so that's the plan. So if you guys are learning Japanese this year too, feel free to let me know in the comments. Let me know if you guys have some tips as well. I'm always open for learning some new ways to go about things. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and hit the bell as well so you can keep on track with me with these videos, and we can make sure that we're keeping each other accountable. But until then, see you in the next one.